All right, guys. Today I'm here with James Fitzgerald, winner of the first ever CrossFit Games, the OPEX Brand Master, Masters competitor, grid coach, owner of the Phoenix Rise, coach of athletes such as Danny Nichols, Irvin Hernandez, and Amanda Goodman, and coach of coaches such as CJ Martin. Thank you so much for joining me today, James. How's
It's
it
good to
going,
be
man?
here.
Yeah.
Sounds great, man. I'm great. Thanks for having me.
All right. Yeah. I don't think anyone else has got a introduction like that, so I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Oh, good.
So, dude, can you give me a little bit of background, maybe how you started training and kind of what got you into coaching?
Yeah, well, I was an active kid, Canadian boy. I grew up in Canada playing a number of different sports, played a lot of them in high school, and never did any quote-unquote training whatsoever. The physical training that we had was practice, and in practice was basically just skills on soccer and basketball, volleyball, cross-country running, badminton, hockey, and I did a lot of it and did all of it quite well, based upon where I was geographically. There's a very low amount of talent, I guess you could say, but it had a lot of opportunity for me to practice a whole bunch of things. And from that, I gained notoriety in a couple of sports, hockey and soccer, and then played soccer and had a tough injury when I was 18 years old. And then coming back from that injury, I recognized I had to do strength and conditioning, quote unquote, in order to get better at it. And then recognized, I remember an aha moment. I was doing, believe this or not, I was doing leg extensions and leg curls for rehabbing tib fib fracture. I mean, we don't need to go into the purpose behind that in 1992, but as to why that was the prescription. But it just made me recognize, doing a week of that and then 2 weeks of it, I was doing stuff like going up and down stairs and like, just day-to-day functional pieces where I was aware, where I just recognized I'm actually in better condition right now, physically and physical structure, than what I was when I was an athlete, quote unquote. And so that aha moment to me was profound, where I was going back to the rehab center and actually teaching some of the other injured older men or older women or kids or whatever, and telling them like what I was doing and how to do stuff properly, where she basically had to kick me out. The therapist was like, okay, you're done with your rehab, you can leave now, you don't need to come back. And so then I just knew that I had to get into some kind of movement physiology and went to school for it. And then, here I am 23 years later and still kicking it.
All right. Awesome, dude. So I know you train with like under quite a lot of mentors. I see you've worked with Greg Glassman. So you work with him. What are some of the other names you work with, and how they kind of influence the way you train people?
Yeah. Indirect. I didn't actually directly work with Greg, but I feel that I have, because I followed his methodology really closely, and read everything up to the CrossFit journals. I don't remember what number it was. You just get a big stack in your level 1. If people remember that in the day, but if you don't, those who are old schoolers will remember and appreciate it. Man, there's been a lot. Mark Twight has been an influence to me, and the Jim Jones methodology. Charles Poliquin has had a massive influence on my concepts around strength and conditioning. The powerlifting gods, Louis Simmons for sure, and West Side has had a significant impact on the way I see things. The manuals of training, Zatskiorsky and Medvedev, and I guess you could say the non-North Americans and how they captured this perspective on physiology. Even people that did that new age movement of fitness, the functional fitness, the Juan Carlos Santana, Mark Verstegen, Peter Twist, Paul Chek, these guys. I mean, they really had a big part to play in changing the landscape as to what fitness was and how it was done. They had a real big impact on me as well. Dave Tate, who is a West Side guy, was just a really great person too, that had a good influence for me. Yeah, and I may forget others. There's some guys, too, you wouldn't know their names, but they had a real big impact. National level coaches or world level Olympic coaches. And then the functional guys, the Gray Cook and David Leaf and Guy Voyer, just to name a few, that back in the day, those were the kind of forefathers of this movement piece as to what it means in functional movement. So they're a big influence for me.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
So like I think it's one thing to read up on all this, and it's another thing to start applying it to athletes, and actually getting people fitter. So, like, what are you like? When did you really start? So I come from a CrossFit background. I think a lot of people listen to this might do. So how long did it take you to start trying to apply what you'd learned from these other mentors to a CrossFit model, or that kind of mixed modality model?
Yeah, well, the model only came into my concept when I started doing it, right? So the late 2004, and then, what I generally tell coaches now, because I practice that, is that the great coaches and the great mentors that I had, which I learned from, it's the reason why I try to give that off too, because I think it's a really valuable lesson for other coaches, is that you have to take what you learn and you got to make it your own. So you got to make it your own, because that's going to be the best blend that's going to help that client or yourself. So on Monday is when you implement it, to answer your question. So when you learn shit on the weekend, you start Monday. And so when I learned about CrossFit and I did it, for the hundreds of clients I had as a personal trainer at that time, doing program design one-on-one as well as working with athletes, all of them tried it. So I would basically try to figure out different shits around energy system and mixing pieces and just being in the trenches with it, just to see what works and what didn't for what population. And then, of course, track and measure the whole time to determine what is effective. So to answer your question, I think coaches need to, not take it as propaganda. That's what a lot of coaches fall into prey, is like, oh, that's a really smart person who's saying something I don't know. So that must mean is there's truth in that because I don't know it. So, but you need to take that information and just say it could be truthful, but I'm going to certainly try it and then figure out exactly where it fits. And then in the end, what you'll come down to is, which is the reason why you may come back to OPEX, is that all the principles are all in there. Like there's truth to everything, which is just standing on the giants of shoulders who have said this for hundreds of years, basically.
I'm so nervous and talking to you. I have no idea why.
No problem, man.
All right. So I think from what I've seen, like a general mixed modality model seems to work really, really well for beginners getting into it. I've got some theories that, you expose them to the first kind of introduction into strength training. And at the time, there's kind of a lot of aerobic base building kind of going into that. And it seems to hit a lot of, you throw a lot of darts and you actually hit a lot of things. As people get more advanced into the training, they come out of that beginner phase. I know one of the things that really attracted me to your stuff and what was the old OPT site and the Big Dog blog was the idea of kind of isolating out variables. So you know what I mean, like specifically attacking aerobic system, specifically attacking lactate system, and going down that way. I think we're seeing more and more of that when people are training, to be competitive, or even like if they just want to get better. Did you have like an aha moment when you started isolating variables, or did you do that from the start?
I think my own personal journey in it was that, because I'd pretty much done quote unquote aerobic stuff, or just call it strength or power things, with bodybuilding, powerlifting, cross country running, just what was called strength and conditioning then, which is basically like strongman medleys, right? Or bike sprints or running around the track. But with all my examples I just given you, it was either end of the spectrum, right? It was either CP work or aerobic work at some capacity, right? And then if you think about who I am in my essence, I'm generally more an aerobic person. So but I have great absolute strength relative to my body weight, and mechanically not the best. So if you take me and my filters of that, I started recognizing that middle zone. And then to go back to your point, which I think what I experienced right away and how I can pick those things out, like you say, is that you need to experience it in order to recognize how we say you can't balance all three balls at one time. And so if you need to work on that for someone who's beyond a beginner, because the beginner comes in and when they just start anything, when they go from 0 to like 2 miles an hour, everything to them is either muscle endurance or it's aerobic, because they can't actually develop enough power to have any effect on the glycolytic system. It may feel glycolytic, but it's only because of end-range muscle endurance or because they don't have the aerobic enzymes to help respiratory exchange and all those things. So really, that's where CrossFit or quote-unquote safe mixed modal training fits into a ton of people who are starting, because it's the same effect for everyone. But it's not the middle zone, because they actually can't get into the middle zone. It may look like it, but if someone like finishes a 20-minute workout and is high-fiving you, then they're not in middle zone. So when to start people with that, of course they develop a nervous system then, and they develop repetitions, and they get better at strength, they get better at the aerobic stuff, and now they start becoming a better opportunity to get into that middle. And then when you start, like you say, people who are beyond beginners, in order to pick out those variables, you have to, and this is the answer to the question, you have to assess all those pieces as to where they sit in comparison to hundreds of other people on that exact same spectrum. Because when you start looking at that, let's call it like a Daniels VDOT program. If I was to assess your back squat, your battery for 30 seconds, your 60-second output, 3-minute output, 5, 8, 12, 20, 60, and just imagine if I had 100 plots on that, do you think I'd be able to see who's on and who's not on in regards to that? You'd be able to see it. So when someone gets beyond a beginner, I recognized in my own training, plus in a bunch of other people I was doing it with, that not everyone responds specifically to that curve. And so you have to pick out where they're weak or where they're strong when they want to, quote unquote, get better at fitness, whether that be competitive or just rounding themselves out, let's say.
All right, cool. So I know you mentioned that you take well to aerobic training. You tend to have you're quite naturally adapt at that. And I think I kind of fall into that category as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, taller guy, and I tend to do better at longer stuff. I think that's always been in my essence. But likewise, I've seen people that just naturally fall on that power curve. You know what I mean? They're just naturally really powerful people. I know there's a guy at my box. He's 5'8", and he could do a 60-inch box jump. You know, he's just super explosive kind of guy. Once you identify that someone's kind of naturally aerobic training, or you know, they naturally like to do explosive power training, how do you adapt your programs then if you're going for that mixed model? Do you skew it more towards aerobic for the aerobic guy to try and get the most out of that, or do you hit the other end of the spectrum harder to kind of round it out?
Yeah, if the well, it goes back to what the goals are of that person, right? Because if their goal is, like you said, to round out in mixed modal training, then we're not going to go after what they're really good at, but we are going to go towards their essence the closer we are to competition. But the further you are away from competition, you have to develop the aerobic system for that explosive person really well without threshold. So you have to go, let's call it super slow, and develop mitochondrial ability, capillary density, left ventricle ability, O2 to the muscles, lymph flow. You got to teach them this. Like, you just need to breathe and maintain, bro. You know, and send O2 in and send it out, send O2 in, send it out, and then track their absolute strength and speed, though, as you're doing it. Because if you do this training and they get weaker, then they're not doing this training effectively, or you're doing too much. Do you see that? Yeah. So I'm rounding them out with super slow. Let's take obviously the more aerobic person. You know, all these people, both aerobic and they're still going to be doing easy aerobic work because it helps in recovery, okay? Because I'm just a huge fan of people doing, let's call it easy work for every bit of intense work that they do. So it seems like I'm a huge fan of aerobic work, but I just love recovery. So I see a lot of it as recovery between intense sessions. Everyone wants to work out more, right? So why not do that with recovery work? But back to the point, if someone's more aerobic, then yes, I want to develop, the whole goal for them is to be able to develop more sustainable, higher end power for a longer period of time, right? Because we know they're going to recover fast between any of those intense bouts, but they don't have the chassis underneath the hood to increase that power to extend it. So I don't need to spend a lot of time over here doing this, because they're like, man, I could do this while I'm sleeping. So you got to spend time over here with this alactic into lactic power work, which comes with obviously good absolute strength, to develop a more sustainable power output. So I think what you've got with programs that are, I guess, prolific online out there, and why a whole ton of people maybe 3 or 4 years ago really liked them, is because a shit ton of people had done CrossFit and pushed themselves over to the aerobic capacity continuum. And then the tests showed up as being what? Heavy metcons. So where do you think a lot of people then started training? At the power end, which certainly, so they had a great aerobic capacity, and now they went over here and did strength training, and it made them a great CrossFitter. So you just got to see why that worked for those specific people, because there was a lot of people that were uber powerful that tried that and got crushed. Right? They just became super powerful and then blew up at everything past 3 minutes. And so I think that person needs to be, adequately trained over here. And we could get into the argument of like, well, if they're fast twitch and whatever, I really don't give a shit, because they've chosen to compete. Therefore, they have to be good at something that's 20 to 30 minutes long, just as good as 2 minutes.
Yeah. So we're talking a lot about competition here, and for especially when it comes to tracking someone's essence, for the sport of CrossFit, how does your approach differ when it just comes to general GPP? For people that maybe aren't interested in competing specifically in the sport of fitness.
So how does my philosophy in training for general physical preparation?
Yeah,
it goes back to their goals. So, I mean, it depends upon what the person wants to do. If they want to live long and prosper, then they're probably not going to be doing any CrossFit methodology. I can tell you that. If they want to if they want to, hike on a mountain when they're 95, I'm pretty much going to be giving them great structural balance training and easy aerobic intervals or fun aerobic work, basically. And that aerobic work could be anything. That could be farmer carries and light tire flips in intervals. That could be airdyne intervals. That could be, plank holds and ring work and jump rope. It could be mixed work, but it's aerobic. It's not high threshold stuff. Why? Because it's not going to help them live long and prosper. So I basically look at, general, and I teach coaches how to do this. If you get someone coming in who's overfat, toxic, and can't move, if you have this one-fit-all program for that person, it's not going to work. You can't give them floor-based training program. You can't give them, mechanically tough exercises. You can't give them body weight resistant exercises because they can't work against their body weight. So what are you going to do? If you don't have leg press and an assisted chin-up and dumbbells in your gym, you're pretty much shit out of luck to help that person. And you can strap all the bands you want on that person, but they're not going to be doing CrossFit, let me tell you that. So I think you got to look at the person and say what your goals and what your current level is, and then how do we move you slightly forward from that. And if you have that idea in mind, I think everyone will be successful. But don't forget about the dose response of what you're giving them in relation to their goals. That's what people get lost on, right?
So out of interest, do you have any tactics that you can use as a coach to kind of really get the real goals out of people? Because everyone comes and says, "What are your goals?" And they always say, "Well, bro, I want to get fit." And you're like, "Okay," and then you might be able to get, "Okay, well, maybe I want less fat and more muscle," and then but then you dig into it, and they really want actually to have to be able to play tennis, and there's all these kind of underlying things, and maybe they want to be part of a group, and like, how do you have any kind of things that you use to get those out of people?
Yeah, for sure. We do have a course too. It's called Life Coaching OPEX. It's a 2-day course that's part of our level 1 modules, which we teach coaches specifically how to take that through a systematic process. But the two main areas that we focus on is creating truth around the resources and the recipe that this person actually has that shows signs of coming true, that's actually setting them up for the goals that they want to have. So I hope that makes sense to you. If not, I'll explain a little bit more deeper. You're basically asking about trying to get to the levels down of what you just discussed there, of how to get to those real reasons why they're saying what they're saying up here. So they're saying, "Yo, bro, I want to look good naked." But then as you go deeper down, the better relationship you build with that person, you basically recognize this guy just wants to get laid. And if that's the case, without even necessarily getting into the conversation or discussing it, you don't have to have the conversation and sign a contract that you both agree that he just wants to get laid. But it's a very important part of the conversation to recognize for you as a coach how you're going to connect his highest values to why he's doing fitness. Because if you just go after competition or community or Facebook posts or a Whole30 challenge or showing up with fat people to take body fat scores, that's not in his gig. I'm not doing it for that. And you missed it because you didn't attach the reason why they need to go after those goals to their highest values. So I guess the bottom, the number one thing coaches need to do is to actually really get to know the person. Because when you get to know the person, you get to figure out what really matters to them in their current life, where they are. If they're 19, their values are different than when they're 38, than when they're 63, right? So you got to ask them what's your highest values, and then connect what they do in fitness and what you provide and how that's going to help affect those values to that person.
So once you've dug your way back down, you're almost trying to find things further up the chain that you can then relate back to that.
You got it. You're just connecting it.
Yeah. So you'll set, like quantitative goals on their fitness.
Yep.
That are just markers of how close you're getting to those core values.
Yeah, because then it's an evidence-based system to say that you want to get so many muscle-ups and look good naked, and here's the track that you have to be on in order to do that. You're basically saying, are you willing to do that? And they're like, yeah, I'm willing to do that. Okay, well, we're going to do a check-in in 2 weeks so that we stay on track with what we just said was your goal. Because, as I said, my first point, a lot of people have those as fantasy. And as coach, you need to be able to put on paper with your experiences, right? What do you think is the best line of action in order to get towards that? But if you're not measuring it, it gets very uncomfortable when you're 6 months down the road and they have no muscle-ups and they're not leaner, right? Mm. And so I teach coaches the tools to track and measure that, but then also to align those things efficiently so that you don't get lost in the program. So you can tweak stuff and go, we're not really on track right now. Let's tweak it a little bit, and then it goes in the right direction, and then it's just money. And that's what creates trust from a client to a coach process, not the fantasy world.
Yeah, I think as a coach, I've probably been a little bit guilty of that before, and
Me too.
I've probably been guilty of actually shoveling my goals for that person into them instead of actually being a receiver for what they want.
Yeah, and I think that's fair because as coaches, we just want them to live what we went through, and that's our filter. We're like, no, man, this is how you do it, and this is how you're going to reach fulfillment. And they're like, I'm not actually interested in being on a mission to kill myself, which may be our mission, right? So, I think I think coaches, if they fell into that, it's not it's not with the wrong intent. It's with good intent. That we made those mistakes.
So, do you do you advise people to, as a coach, would you say maybe try and find clients with similar goals to you as a transition into that? And because I'm not sure I'd be able to adapt myself or be excited to adapt myself and probably be the best coach I could.
Yeah.
If we didn't almost have some kind of relatable, like personal thing between me and the client.
Yeah, but I think that's what goes on your shirt, why I believe in entrepreneurism for coaches, and why I also believe in an individual model for that client connection, and why I do believe in that coach being an entrepreneur and having their own business for that, whether they're duplicating themselves for that. That t-shirt, yes, should attract the people that you want to work with. I mean, that's the number one thing we talk about in order to attract the right clients is like what your philosophy is and your mission and vision. That basically says, I want you, people that look just like you, right? So if you're a person who's starting out, you are going to have a larger fishing net, right? So you got to say, I want people who are interested in fitness and learning about nutrition and blah, blah, blah. And that's who you're going to get, which is a large fishing pool. Mm. And then over time, you are going to get into a discipline, which is beautiful, right? Because I'd rather see you say, you know what? I only like working with females who are out of shape, 2 years before they get pregnant, who want to turn into badass bitches who just crush shit, and I'm really good at that. I think you'd find hundreds of females that would fall in love with your shit, right? Because you're eloquently saying, that's who I love working with. So I think it'll take time for people to figure out where that discipline is, and my vision of an individual model facility looks like that, where you have 8 or 9 or 12 different coaches who are specialists in all those areas. So then the coach loves that program for that person, and they're not saying, oh, I'm a fitness instructor, and they're working with the over-fat person who they hate and the uber, fit person who they love. And you can just see it's a very unauthentic piece for it, instead of everyone having their place and going by what their t-shirt says,
Yeah, that's a really interesting model because I think with functional fitness, mixed modality training, CrossFit coming on, a lot of CrossFit gyms, then obviously a lot of people kind of copying that model. It seems to be, I guess it's more coaching than, DW Sport or, one of the big box gyms.
Yeah.
But it's still not that kind of boutique personal model. And do you see the better gyms and or maybe not even the better gyms, but do you see more gyms kind of adopting that smaller one-to-one experience?
Yeah. Yes, I do, because there's an end game in it, and currently there's no end game in the group fitness model. No one has thought about the end game for that based upon the regulations and who can do it and what it means and what it's going to end up being. Everyone's just in the game, in the churn right now. And in the individual model, which has been around for a long period of time, it works for the owner, the trainer, and the client. So there's no argument that it always has been there. That's the thing. It's just that you don't see it because what's flashy is the group model, right? Or what's flashy is that brand. But yeah, I see the future of it in functional fitness, which is beautiful, right? And it's a whole new medium of what that is today. I think we can teach people how to do that and then allow them to fish for themselves in our box when they do that. And so that's my vision for the future. It's pretty much that. I call it like the box, right? Which is not the Globo Gym, and it's not a private studio, but it's a place where you have a collection of 80, 100, 300 people who are doing all their own training program, working out in the same area.
So I mean, within that kind of model, I guess you could have a guy that really liked group training, and he could find clients that really like to work together with 4s or 5s in a small setting like that. And would that fit into it, or?
It's possible, but then in order to sell that system, it's very gray, and you can't sell gray systems.
Yeah.
So
I get it.
I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I'm not a fan of it in that model. Because then other people are like, oh, I want to work out with Johnny, Billy, and Bobby too, and then Johnny shouldn't be doing that squat, and then Billy needs to do this, and it gets convoluted.
Yeah.
Now, if there's like fitness testing within your box, every month you have like the Saturday testing day, there could be a lot of people doing the same things, right? And everyone comes together and does the 2K row and the bench press test and the pull-up test and, all on the same day. That brings community. Yeah. That brings, what I'm saying? But that's at least now you have data. Oh, tell me about it.
Yeah.
So now you have this data, right, which everyone falls in love with. There's simple tests where people can see on the board, this is my progression. And it's funny, Johnny, because I didn't do any of your program, but both of our back squats went up. How about that? So it's I think it's just a more eloquent way long term that works for everyone.
Yeah, actually, weirdly, I think I've been drifting towards that model. I've been running a CrossFit gym for 4 years now. So there's obviously people that have been with me for 4 years are a very, very different fitness level than people that are starting out. And I think, actually just yesterday, I realized like how to work out up on the board. And I think the people in the 5:30 session did it. No one in the 6:30 session actually did that workout because people are like, oh, my leg's a little bit sore today. And I was like, oh, I want to work on this. I want to work on this. And I ended up writing like 6 different programs out for people. And yeah, I feel like I'm accidentally kind of falling into that model.
Because it's evolutionary, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that and not to take anything from your model because I did try that too, but I quickly found out with 2 CrossFits that I was like, yeah, that's not going to work. That I saw like into the future, 3 or 4 years down the road, what everyone is getting into, which is this problem that you're recognizing. The more competent you become as a coach, you're like, I just don't feel good writing that up for everyone for 12 different people,
Yeah.
Because Nancy and Bob and Janice, and you're just like, okay, folks, you need to do something different each time here today, and this is how you're going to do it.
Yeah, so I guess even better than me checking in on 6 different people writing up a board, it'd be better if there was 6 different trainers.
Or you were the trainer for all those people, and they were on their own program at that period of time.
Yeah. So
just think about that. Let's just think, in numbers, and I've done this numerous times, and we know that past like 80 members is the inflection point where everyone makes money and the business actually works for the atypical 2,000 square foot spot, this many, things. So you have those members coming in throughout the day and periodic times throughout the week where you have man hours. So there's going to be coaches on the floor that are going to just watch and see how they're doing in the training program. But you may be there when there's 12 clients in your gym and only 3 of them may be your direct clients. But all 12 of them can have your watchful eye, right? Where you're like, no, hey, Johnny, don't forget, chest up. Yeah, that's correct. Should you go up? No, you shouldn't go up. Stay in that rep zone. So you're just giving them like coaching advice, what a coach should do, right? But you don't need to like be on their back squatting, which is it's not personal training. We don't want to be doing personal training. We can do personal training, but that's not what we're doing at that time. And we're not giving group classes. So we're finding that middle zone where it works for everyone.
Yeah, that sounds Yeah, that's really cool. I think that's it definitely sounds like a nice, like you said, a nice middle ground between that
Yeah,
kind of.
it's the next wave. You're going to see it, and we're going to be the leaders in that. We want to educate people in order to do that. And of course, I'm biased to it because I have an education system that's going to help that. Let's not lie about it. And I do have a product that's going to certainly help it. But I just seen it work so often now for the beta versions. It just makes complete sense for everyone.
Yeah. So I know earlier you talked about the importance of getting quantitative data on people. I wonder if you've got any kind of fitness tools that you really like to use with people. I know people start using HRV. I'm a huge fan of MyFitnessPal, which is a food tracking app.
Yeah. Yep.
Things like that. Do you have any kind of favorite tools you like to use, or any tips and tricks you can share with people?
I think for a general audience, I think the two that you just shared are two fascinating ones. We use the PAL basically to get inventories and a starting point where people are tracking their food, and that awareness piece for people is just a game changer. So when people start doing it as clients or coaches, they just start recognizing, holy shit, I don't eat enough protein or drink enough water. It's simple, basic things. So just the tracking of it itself, I think, is really good. And there's more than MyFitnessPal. There's a bunch of other ones. There's some legit ones now that you can even frickin' take pictures and it can count up amounts, and it's retarded. But so there's really good ones out there for that, for food tracking. And then HRV, I think there needs to be more for it, but for the starting client, I think HRV is way too advanced. I think HRV would be for someone who's kind of that middle ground individual. So the person who's been in it for a couple of years and is just trying to refine things and look a little deeper underneath the hood. I think that may be the case. Personally on site, I do a lot of data on a bunch of different things that are not actually duplicatable, but I can give you some insight into that and whether people want to do it or not. I find it fascinating.
Yeah, sure, man.
I do an in-body test, which is a piece of machinery that looks at intracellular to extracellular water, because it can tell me a lot about performance of what the hydration level is for inside the cell, and it's a really great machine that can determine that. I do a lung capacity test and compare that to lean body mass, because that gives me quantitative measures in terms of how much O2 someone has going in to how much lean mass they have. So they're going to do something that's work capacity. I'd like to know what their lung capacity is. And then I do a body metrics fat analysis, which is basically an ultra B wave that we just click people with, and we can determine exactly how much of a skin fat fold they have at different areas of their body, and then try to correlate that with blood or urine or saliva or whatever the case we want to be for that. We do grip testing grip dynamometer, because we can determine a lot of stuff. We do posture testing and posturology stuff to basically determine exactly at a resting point where people are. We do work as well as resting SpO2 levels, body caliper testing, and then functional movement screens, movement analysis, and work capacity tests. So I'm pretty invasive on all those things. If people look at it and say, there's a couple of cool pieces in there they want to use, that's great.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. I think the importance of getting actual data to be able to track and follow and make sure you're really making improvements. It's
immense.
I think it actually takes a bit of courage as a coach to track it that much.
It does. It takes balls and it takes patience. That's the thing. But I think a lot of people get caught up in recognizing they love the process of coaching and they just want to coach and coach. But they get caught up in just the coaching, and they get lost in conceptualizing and debriefing on what happened, because they don't get to see the movie reel of why they did it, what were the scores, how was it, so they see people improving who go from nothing to something, and they're like, oh, that's the greatest program ever. Yeah, we'll keep tracking those people and let's see what happens then. And so that's why I think all over time, you got to love numbers and you got to love data if you're a coach. And if you don't, you need to hire someone who's going to do it for you. That's key.
Yeah. Actually, one thing I'd be interested to have your input on this. In the UK, I've just found this brand called DNA Fit. You take
Andrew Steele and I have been talking for the past couple of months on influencing CrossFitters in terms of that testing and what OPEX is going to do for a specific test for that.
Oh, really? Yeah, because I just ordered my cheek swab, and I'm going on a course on the 8th of July to kind of learn more about it.
Awesome.
But I thought it was fascinating. I love the idea of them looking at these genetic markers, and apparently they can tell you your the big one for me is they can tell you if you're lactose or gluten intolerant and kind of what kind of diet. I think it looks at salt, alcohol, caffeine sensitivity, and then your potential for VO2 max, and then whether you are more aerobic based or more kind of a fast twitch athlete. Because I know the type of training you're doing can kind of mask that when they show up.
Yep.
And I just thought that was absolutely fascinating. I assume you've already been working with something like that.
Yeah, we've put a number of our athletes through it, and I've tested it myself. And it's really the only legitimate system out there that has good scientific research on the back end. That's like truth in the scientific research for how many measures they do on alleles and how they all measure up. So I really think there's a lot of good to it. One of the issues that they're going to fall into, though, which I've told them about it, is they've got to educate the consumer on two things. Number one, why their measurement techniques and their system is smarter and better on the back end. And number two, what the hell does this mean for your training and your lifestyle? And so I'm trying to figure out on the inside, because if someone wants to, they're 70% power, 30% endurance, and they want to run a marathon, I still don't know based upon their idea, what that program looks like. So I think there's a lot to go into, like what you got to work with relative to what you need to do in order to function, So, because to give you an example, Danny's, which I can share with you, I can share my PDF as well as Danny's, for example.
Yeah,
and
sure.
You can see that he was like 53% endurance and 47% power. So you can see that his ability for VO2 max was moderate, I think. But if you look at our injury potential of his versus mine, as well as Amanda's as well, some of the shit just doesn't really line up. And the reason why it doesn't is because they've chosen a sport where you got to be good at everything. So what's the truth beyond what they're capable of as opposed to what they have been doing? That's the intricate stuff that I've been seeing. And of course, it's going to make us ask more questions, which is great.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's fascinating. You found the same thing. Is that the actual DNA fit? Yeah, it's so cool. I can't believe more people aren't talking about it.
Well, I mean, they basically, well, let me be completely honest with you. I've been approached by 8 different DNA protocol fitness programs. Okay, so it's basically rape and pillage out there. I think the data that was gained from 23andMe, where people were looking at all these different kinds of genetic profiles, all that data now is contained where they can say we've connected all that data and looked at all these people, and these alleles, when they're connected like this, can tell you about lactate threshold, blah, blah, blah. And so there's groups out there now only looking at one of those and are saying this will directly correlate to cardiovascular fitness, and then packaging it now as like a DNA fitness protocol. And so when I spoke with DNA Fit, I was like, listen, I've been approached by 7 other companies that are doing this. What makes you unique and different in that? And their answers were really good. They were legit answers, and the background of it made a lot of sense. And so I just think that the reason why, to answer your question or your point on like why isn't a lot of people hearing about it, is because it's prolific out there. I mean, the market is filled with it now, and so you're just going to see a lot more of it come to light through media.
Oh, awesome! So, So can you maybe give us some insight? I know you've got this information on some of your athletes. Has that actually changed the way you trained any of them, or have you just kind of kept doing what you're doing anyway?
Yeah, I've kind of kept doing what I'm doing.
I suppose you kind of figured out, because you've been working them for a few years, what they were telling you anyway.
Exactly.
And it was just nice to get a confirmation, right?
Yeah, you got it. Well, some of them were not confirmation. So I can tell you I didn't really change things, but I certainly looked at things a little differently. And to be completely honest, I've only seen it for 2 months now. And so I really haven't had enough time, because we've been focused on a specific goals in mind, whether it be regionals or games, to think about exactly how that affects it. So I think it's just another great tool that you can't like stick to. But it's something that just gives you, I guess, like you said, a reaffirmation of like good principles. Yeah.
So, last thing before we go. Personally, I'm a big grid fan. I love it. I think it's awesome. I have this sneaking suspicion in the back of my head that Rich Froning and Jason Khalipa going team this year is because they're slightly threatened by grid. That's just me. I don't
know
if that's true.
They're not.
But yeah, I know you I coach or own the Phoenix Rise, and can you tell me some of your plans for next year, or maybe some of the new elements in grid that have popped up that you're excited about?
I can't tell you. Well, I can't. I really don't have an answer to both of those. But I can tell you this: is that we had a hiccup in financing for the first year, and in order for the league to be successful, to go forward, to actually show that the product is viable, and like people like you and I can look at it and go, "Wow, that's really cool," and then you can have fans and teams and just you can cheer for people that you like. There actually needs to be money that needs to be made, for TV and for the owners and also for the league, in order for it's a business, right? It's business. It's not fun. It's not organic like CrossFit competitions now. So I think we had a hiccup in the first year that's going to prevent us, really getting a steamroll effect right now. So it's a very unknown area as to how effective that's going to be. So if people who are in the higher order look at it and say, wow, that's a really cool product that should be on our TV station, then all of a sudden now we have more hours, we have more exposure, and then we can go out and look for larger sponsors that are like, hey, we have 60 minutes on NBC Sports, twice this week. I think we should talk about a deal for sponsorship with like a local, sport agency or Ford trucks or whatever the case may be. And then money flows and everything works. And so because I'm up at the I can see what's happening at that top level. Last year I was only discussing this stuff down here because it was exciting and really cool. But I got to be forthright in saying I'm not sure how it's going to work until we get this top level thing happening up here. And I'm not going to speak on behalf of CrossFit, but they may be looking at it, but I don't really care. I don't really think they give a shit as far as like Jason and Rich and their teams and whatnot for grid. I think it's just two different sports completely. It's just ironic that there's a number of CrossFitters that actually go into it, but the best CrossFitters are not the best grid athletes. So it's just not going to work out for either group, let's say.
Yeah, I think, just personally, like I said, I'm a grid fan. What was really, really cool for me to see was kind of people chasing their strengths instead of trying to round it out. And you see like monsters like Danny Nichols doing things that you don't see really in CrossFit competition. And, guys like Irvin Hernandez, who I didn't know a human could move that fast.
Yeah.
And it's just as a team dynamic, it's actually interesting. I don't know if I'll offend anyone with this, but a lot of times I really like watching the CrossFit individuals, but when it gets to the team part, I skip that bit.
Oh yeah, no, I'm the same way. I mean, because I had some, intent on my team and what they were doing, of course I had more interest in it, but yeah, as a viewer, it's honestly as boring as shit, dude. And not to make it sound incorrect either, but a lot of the talent for a large percentage of the teams are not good. And so compared to what you're seeing on individual capabilities, that collection of team members, 80% of the time are not as good as what you're seeing individually. So that means out of 30 teams, only maybe 5 of them are worth watching for some individuals you're interested in looking at. So just overall as a product, yeah, it's very tough. As well, a lot of the tests that they do are based on logistics. And so when you base tests on logistics, that's not the right way to combine fitness tests for teams. And so it's very easy to strategize to look at bottlenecks and where things come together. Whereas in grid, it was like if you didn't do your shit, your team lost. So it puts people in that position where it's like you effed up on a rope climb by one pull that you missed, and you lost. You lost the entire race because of it, and your team lost the match because of it. So it's so exciting to watch where you're like, who's going to hit it first? Who's going to hang on to the muscle ups? And I think that's the intent of competition, what it should be like.
Yeah, I just got to say, I love the bar at the bottom when it would drift towards the rep counter.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, I remember watching. And it makes you really, really like pumped for it.
Yeah.
I know. My fiance, she picked out the DC Brawlers. It was like her pick, and I was like, oh, well, I'll I've been on the OPT course. I know James, and he's a cool guy, so I'll go Phoenix. And
thank you.
And we were we were watching this, and it was like really getting into it. I think for me, it was close to the games. I think for her, she actually preferred it to the games. She's always posting stuff on
awesome.
social media about grid. She loves it.
Yeah, I mean, people who watched it live just really fell in love with it. They thought it was a really special product. But if you understand the mechanics of it for success and how much money goes into the production of doing it, just putting 1,000 people in the stands, every match is not going to kick it. It's not going to make it. So it needs to get a real large, viewer TV audience in order for it to be successful. So we'll put our fingers together and see. And sorry we didn't come through to, make your pick for last year, but if you go back and review the tape, because I'm a bad loser as well. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in if I was a bad loser. I mean, competition is all about that. We got screwed on that the fire match. I think it was race 10 where they did some reps that were good, and then they called the race back, and then we lost that race, and then it put us in a shitty hole. So we should have won anyways. But anyways, that's beside the point.
All right, dude. So just before we go, I know you say you got courses available. You got website. Can you kind of recite some of that so people can know how to get a hold of you guys? Yeah,
our business is OPEX Fitness. And you can look at us, it's what we do for our training blog as well as our education at opexfit.com. We have, 2 basic products, and what we're looking for people is we're going to be coaching coaches to become better at coaching and to have a professional career in coaching and really like it. And we have 5 modules that does that. And then we coach to consumer. So if you're really uber interested in becoming a badass in fitness, either in competition or just to improve your own fitness level, we have coaches that can take care of that for you virtually in an online process. And so those are the 2 main things that if people are interested in, we can hit you up on that.
Oh, excellent. So have you got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, any of those things?
Yeah, you can find them all at opexfit.com because I wouldn't be able to even ramble them off for you.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, James. Thanks for talking to us. And yeah, great. Hopefully we'll talk again.
Okay, buddy. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.